Hey there! Before the video starts, I'm warning you that there will be heavy spoilers for My Hero Academia, the manga and the final arc. So watch at your own risk, okay? And with that said, let's go. My Hero Academia. Who doesn't know about it? I'm not saying anything new when I say it's been one of the big ones for the past few years. We could talk about a lot of things about it, like the cool roster of characters, superhero references, how it questionably handles its female characters. And I want to stop there because that's what we'll be talking about in this video. But about a character in particular. Because there is one character that stands out among all of them. This character stands out because every time she gets the spotlight, everything turns really weird in the most sickening way imaginable, so to speak. And that character is, you guessed it, Mirko. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that she goes from this to this in just 2 fights. And that's it. Her role in the story is just ending up like this. There's nothing else for her. Yep, for some reason, every time she has some screen time, the author likes to brutalize her for no reason, at any chance possible. And you're probably gonna say something like, come on, there's gotta be an explanation for something like that. Well, not really. At least, not a reasonable one. But don't worry, we're gonna talk about that in this video. This topic was bothering me a lot, so I've been searching about this and found out that there's barely any discussion on it. And I noticed that every time someone brings it up, there's like 10 or so people defending it, and even saying she's treated the same as any other character. Which is a bold claim right there, and you'll see why. In this video, you'll see how and why Mirko is, in fact, the character who gets the most unfair and straight up sickening treatment in all of My Hero Academia. Is this video necessary? Absolutely. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's talk about Mirko's run throughout the manga. I mean, the author himself was very excited for her to take a part in the story, so let's see why. Okay, so Mirko at first just has a couple cameos and nothing else until she has her first fight in the Yaku War arc, where she fights against 5 Hyens. Alright, 5 Hyens are no joke, so the fight is probably gonna be tough, but it's her very first fight, so we shouldn't worry too much about it, right? Well, let's recap what happens in this fight. So, she loses an arm, she rips her hair off, she loses half an ear, she gets impaled in different parts of her body, she gets a chunk taken out of her torso, and on top of all that, she loses a leg. What the fuck? What the hell happened? So as soon as Mirko steps into her first fight, the manga has a sudden increase in brutality and she ends up like she just came out of an Invincible comic. Like this is her first fight we're talking about. If you tell me we've seen her in other fights before, probably one more dangerous than the other and she always gotta win one piece until at one point, being this fight, her luck runs out, okay, I could see that. But this is her first fight and she already ended up worse than any other character alive. And before you say anything like, what, you expected her to win against 5 Hyens? No, obviously not, but I wasn't expecting, well, this when it's literally her very first fight. I don't see the necessity. I know these are 5 Hyens we're talking about, but what's the point of doing all this when she doesn't do anything in the end? Just kill 1 Hyen. And I know these things are a big deal, but that happened at almost the beginning of the fight. So in the end, the fight was just to show how strong the villains are? Really? And why does she lose her arm? Because she just suddenly loses it by some weird-ass quirk that's barely even explained, if at all. Looking like it was purposefully created to make her lose her arm. You may say it's to show how badass she is and how she's able to keep fighting despite losing a limb. Okay, fair enough, but then why does she lose her leg? For the same reason? Seriously? How many limbs does Horikoshi need to remove from her to establish that? Because she just loses it for no reason. She doesn't even destroy the capsule Shigaraki scene. Present Mike does, so she didn't even accomplish anything by it. She ends up like this and hasn't even accomplished anything except killing 1 Hyen, I guess. And maybe you're saying, you wanna marry Sue or what? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying she has to end up unscathed or something like that. I'm just saying that if you're gonna do something such as removing limbs from a character, which is a huge deal, especially when it's not really a common thing, make it mean something, give it an actual purpose. Otherwise, it's just unnecessary torture to the character. And I know what some of you may say. Relax, dude. These are just the consequences of her being reckless. Oh, okay, so Horikoshi does all this to Mirko in her first fight to show her the consequences of being reckless. Alright then. What I understand is that he wants to teach her a lesson. I mean, you know, a character makes the wrong decision, in this case going into the enemy base alone, and you make this character suffer the consequences of those actions, so the character can learn from that. It's basic character development. And if that's the case, then it means we're probably gonna see some change in Mirko the next time we see her. You know, not a 180 turn in personality, but maybe, I don't know, maybe she takes fights in a different way, or she doesn't go for the enemies head on now? Like Mount Lady, for example. She's always been so carefree and didn't really take things seriously, but then after Yaku she changes a bit and we see her in a more serious mood. I mean, she's still her, but you know, it's something at least. It's not much, but it's something. And she doesn't even go through as much as Mirko does. Not even close. So, I guess if it's for the sake of development, I can't really say much now. Granted, I think Horikoshi went a bit out of his way to injure her as much as possible, which is weird. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt and keep going. So the next time we see Mirko is already in the final arc when they're about to fight Shigaraki. If you're watching this, you probably know the context, but I'll explain it just in case. The heroes build a floating platform and teleport Shigaraki inside so they can fight him there. And now Shigaraki is able to deform his left arm and there are hands all over the platform. Keep this part in mind. The platform is filled with these hands, okay? Just keep this in mind.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
So here we have Mirko for the first time after Yaku and... Wait, she's exactly the same?
But you can't do this to me.
Hold on, this wasn't part of the deal. I was willing to accept this for the sake of development, but there's no development here. Then what was all that for? Just to show how quote-unquote badass she is? Really? Or was it just to show how strong the villains are? Also, what is Mirko doing here? Who in their right mind put her to fight Shigaraki? Even at her prime, her abilities are not suited to fight him, and it makes no sense that any of these heroes who are aware of how strong Shigaraki is would make the decision to put her here. You know, it almost feels like the author put her in this fight for a specific reason, even though it doesn't make any sense. But nah, come on. She already lost 2 limbs in her very first fight, and this is just the second one. There's no way something similar happens again. It would be too obvious that there's something weird going on, right? Let's go through this. So, what is Mirko's role in this fight? Well, the only thing she does for the most part is getting hit all the time, getting her prosthetics destroyed, getting trapped at some point, and not much else. I mean, she doesn't really get to do absolutely anything. But after Bakugo is down and Mirko breaks free, out of fucking nowhere, she loses the other fucking arm. Are you fucking kidding me? So the platform is completely filled with these handsome mouths, and I'm supposed to believe and accept that Mirko, probably the most agile hero in this group, is the only one who gets a limb bitten off? Are you fucking serious? Guys, please, just look at it. These things are fucking everywhere. But coincidentally, this only happens to her. How do you explain this then? What's the explanation here? Are you telling me this happens because she's reckless too and that's why she's the only one who suffers this? Then what was Yaku for? If Horikoshi put Mirko through that in Yaku as a consequence of being reckless, then I suppose that means he wanted to make her learn from that mistake, right? And if that's the case, how do you explain this? Is this because she's reckless too? Are you serious? So Yaku served no purpose. What's the purpose of what she went through in Yaku if the same thing is gonna happen in her very next fight? I think it's safe to say that Horikoshi isn't interested in putting Mirko through struggles for development, or for sacrificing herself in order to accomplish something greater. All he wants is to make opportunities to torture her. Because there's nothing Mirko gets from this except just losing another limb. And it's clear now why he put her to fight Shigaraki when it makes absolutely no sense. Anyway, let's keep going because things don't get any better. So, Mirko loses the other arm. And then this happens. Can anybody explain to me? What the fuck is this? Okay, so let me get this straight. So in the span of just 2 fights, Mirko loses 1 leg and both arms, until she is forced to run on stumps, with just 1 leg left. But according to people, she's treated the same as every other character? There's nothing weird here, right? Look, I have no comment on this. This is just straight up sickening. I don't think I even have to say it. But let's just keep going because this is not over yet. So after this shit, please get the shit off the screen, Mirko attacks Shigaraki. And you'll probably say, hey, she actually did something. She hurt Shigaraki. See? It was worth it. Well, not so fast. Because right after that, Shigaraki transforms into his quote-unquote apex form or whatever. And instantly after that, he one-shots Mirko. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Immediately after that, she receives probably the most brutal hit in the entire fight and gets taken out. And that's all from Mirko. That's it. The other heroes can do much else until Deku arrives, because why wouldn't he? And you'll probably say something like, come on dude, Mirko getting instantly taken out just means how powerful Shigaraki is in this form. Okay, then I guess Deku is gonna have a really tough time fighting him in this form. Sure, Deku is a lot stronger than Mirko, but seeing how strong Shigaraki is now, I doubt it'll be a cakewalk. So let's see what happens. Deku beats the shit out of him in literally 2 chapters. There goes Mirko's sacrifice, guys. Losing the other arm was definitely worth it, wasn't it? Deku doesn't let Shigaraki do anything, until he's forced to transform back to his previous form. Yeah, that's it. This form is literally fucking garbage. And that's how we get here. What an amazing run for a character, isn't it? I think I get an idea about why Horikoshi was so excited to make her a part of the story. Let's recap all that we have. So in her first fight, she loses an arm, she loses half an ear, she rips her hair off, she gets impaled in different parts of her body, she gets a chunk taken off her torso, and loses a leg. And did she accomplish anything after all that? Kill one Nomu, I guess. In her second fight, she's sent to fight Shigaraki, which makes absolutely no sense. She doesn't do absolutely anything, and then in the most insulting example of a self-report from the author, she loses the other arm. And gets one-shotted instantly after that. Accomplishments? None. Character development? Non-existent. Oh, and also it's pretty clear that Mirko was just there to be used as a mid-shield in this fight. So we can add that to the list. Yeah guys, I think this is a pretty fair treatment for a character. I mean, there are lots of similar cases to this in My Hero Academia, right? Like, for example, and of course, look, again, I'm not saying nobody can touch her or whatever. I think it's expected for characters to get hurt. Any character. But the thing is, if you're gonna do something like this, dismembering a character, especially in such gruesome ways, I mean, as gruesome as a shounen like this can get, obviously, because she's not getting her limbs cut clean exactly. But when you do something like this, and nothing else with a character, you don't give them any development, nothing except this, being clear that there's no purpose behind all that, then all you're doing is torturing a character. It's just making torture porn with them. And that's a pretty good way to sum up Horikoshi's treatment of Mirko. Torture porn. It's nothing more than that. But you literally said she managed to kill one high-end. So you're telling me that she goes through all this, with no development and no nothing, and the only thing we can say she did, and the only thing she has is killing an Omu at the beginning of her first fight. Seriously? And that suddenly makes all this completely normal and fair. Yeah, that's not how it works. Now, as I mentioned before, I've been looking for opinions on this matter and realized there's very few people who talk about it. And actually, the majority of the people that I've seen defend this kind of treatment to Mirko. And maybe you're wondering, what can anyone say to defend this? And that's a very good question, because even I would have a really tough time trying to defend something like this. But according to the majority of the people, Mirko's treated the same as everybody else because there are other characters who go through shit. And I don't think that's true. Not to that extent, I mean. As you've seen on the title of this video, I can say Mirko's case is incomparable to that of any other character in this series. And we'll go through that right now. We'll go through the arguments used to justify all this shit. I've gathered the most I could, some very popular and some others not that much, but still. I went the extra mile and took note of the latter as well. But now let's start with the comparisons with other characters. So for starters, A lot of people say that Mirko's not treated any differently because Aizawa has lost a leg and cannot use his quirk. Ah yes, this one's a fan favorite. So we're comparing a character we've seen since the beginning of the story, that ended up losing one leg and one eye, to a character we've seen in 2 fights that only has one remaining limb now.
Okay.
Let me be clear. We're comparing Aizawa, a character we've seen in various fights, we've seen part of his backstory with present Mike and Shirakumo, and we've seen different facets of him, like how at first he seems like he doesn't give a shit about anything, but in reality he cares deeply about his students and even children, as we've seen with Eddie. That in one of his last fights, loses an eye and has to cut his own leg. We're comparing that to Mirko, a character we've seen in action for the first time in one of the last arcs. We know nothing about her other than she is battle hungry, and gets dropped into fights to lose limbs for no reason, with no character development at all and no backstory. Also, why does Aizawa lose his leg? Let's talk about that. Shigaraki shoots him a little round and he has no other choice but to cut his leg off or he will lose his quirk. Did I say that he cut it himself and he had no other choice? And he lost an eye, okay, but he can still use his quirk with Monoma. So instead of sitting on the sidelines staring at the villain, he'll be sitting on the sidelines with Monoma next to him staring at the villain.
Yeah, big change.
Why does Mirko lose all her limbs? The first arm? It just happens out of nowhere, and for what? Just to show how badass she is? And why does she lose her leg? She doesn't even accomplish anything by it, so then why? Why does she lose the other arm? Only to kick Shigaraki a bit and then get taken out immediately after? What's the purpose behind all that? Yeah, I don't think it's very fair to compare a fleshed out character that has no other choice but to cut his leg off clean to a character that just appears to get dismembered with no purpose. Look guys, comparing Aizawa's situation to Mirko's is just, it makes no sense, okay? Don't waste your time doing that. But it doesn't end there because people still bring up Endeavor because he lost an arm too and got burned. Once again, he's lost an arm and got burned in his last fight, after having already a few fights and being a fleshed out character. Look, regardless if you like it or not, we've seen Endeavor's attitude change over time, and how he doesn't forgive himself for what he's done. We've seen his own character development and how he had a change of heart when he got to be the number 1. We got more insight into his character. There's none of that with Mirko. Also, why does Endeavor lose his arm? Well, All for One was probably going to kill Hawks, Gino and Tokoyami, but Endeavor got in the way to protect them, losing his arm in the process. They would probably be dead if it wasn't for Endeavor, so at least his sacrifice was for something. What does Mirko achieve every time she loses a limb? And why does Endeavor get burned? Because he had to stop Dabi and apologize to him. Something he ends up doing together with Todoroki and his family. And even if you don't like Endeavor, this can also be seen as his karma. The consequences of his actions in the past. The consequences of, well, being an abuser and failing Dabi. Something he seems to be very regretful of. So we can say there's at least a reason behind all that. I don't think we can say the same thing about Mirko though. But of course she's treated the same as everybody else, right? So who else do people like to compare Mirko with? Well, apparently Mirko's not treated differently because All Might is a cripple now, for example. Are you serious? Okay, I'll say it again. We're comparing a fleshed out character that we've seen since the beginning of the series that has lost the mobility of his legs in his last fight. We're comparing that to a character who we've only seen in 2 fights in the last quarter of the story. And you already know what she appeared for. Seriously? After all the triumphant moments and epic scenes we've seen of All Might throughout the story, now he's comparable to Mirko because he can't use his legs now that he's retired? Because he is retired, in case you forgot. He could have perfectly died fighting All for One with Hercules, and it would be fitting and a cool send-off for him. Especially when his purpose was already fulfilled all the way back to when he lost One for All. But instead, he's still alive, just can't move his legs. And he's somehow comparable to a character that we've barely seen anything about and just exists to get dropped into fights to get dismembered. Yeah, totally fair comparison. This is the same as with Endeavor. Comparing a fleshed out character with backstory, insight, and various fights and cool moments with Mirko doesn't make any sense. Anyway, let's move on. Because another character I've seen used to justify Mirko's treatment is Bakugo. Because apparently, Bakugo suffered too and got beat up by Shigaraki.
You serious?
What? Jesse, what the fuck are you talking about? So now we're comparing a background character with 2 fights on her record and nothing else, with the literal co-protagonist of the story. Just because he got beat up? Bro, we're comparing Bakugo, who we've seen in countless fights and has his own development. And yeah, I am one of those that thinks Bakugo has development. You can see it right after he gets beat up by Shigaraki. He ends up accepting he might always live under Deku's shadow. His arc is completed. It can be better or worse, but it's there. And also, come on, are we really comparing getting beat up and having your arm broken, not ripped off, broken, to getting dismembered every fucking time? And now you'll say, but he literally died. Oh yeah, he dies only to get brought back to life with a quick awakening and fucking kill all for one. Come on. The only semblance of consequence he got is not being able to move his right arm, which is almost inconsequential cause he can still use his quirk with his palm. So not even that. Seriously? Mirko just had 2 fights and, well, we know how that went for her. Comparing Bakugo with Mirko in this regard is ridiculous. I'm honestly not sure if anyone who says this is being serious or not. But since we're taking this topic seriously, I guess I'll have to take this argument seriously as well. But it makes no sense. There's still another character she's compared with, and that character is Edgeshot. Because Edgeshot is a worm and that's worse. Alright, I'll start by saying that Mirko and Edgeshot are similar, in the sense that they're both background characters and pretty much irrelevant to the plot. However, the issue here is not just how the character ends up, but also the treatment they get throughout their appearances and their importance. I don't see Edgeshot getting fucked every time he has some screen time, so let's talk about that for a little bit. For starters, Edgeshot appears earlier than Mirko in the story. He doesn't do much. We get small glimpses of his abilities, but he finishes off the Destro. That's cool. Then in the Shigaraki fight, he doesn't do much until he uses his own body to rebuild Bakugo's heart and bring him back to life. Let's not talk about if it's contrived or not, let's just forget about that right now. But by doing that, Edgeshot suddenly becomes a crucial part of the plot. If it wasn't for him, Bakugo would be dead. He sacrificed himself in order to save Bakugo's life. And I wanna ask again, what does Mirko accomplish when losing all those limbs? Edgeshot brought Bakugo back to life, but does Mirko achieve anything when she gets dismembered? Look, Edgeshot didn't get some relevance either, but at least when he got some at the end, it meant something. So yeah, sucks that Edgeshot is a worm, but you can't compare him to Mirko. At least his only sacrifice was worth it. And that's a wrap for the comparisons with other characters. These are all the characters that, at a first glance, may seem that they get a treatment similar to Mirko's because they get hurt too. But when you pay a little bit of attention, not a lot, just a little bit, you realize there's no comparison. And in case you wanna say something like, dude, you're comparing them as if they have to go through the same things Mirko does to call it fair. Every character suffers their own shit. And that's not what I'm saying, at all. What I mean is that these characters, Aizawa, Endeavor, etc., they at least have other things going on for them. They're either fleshed out, or have more or less development, or have backstories, or have previous fights where they could show off their abilities without, getting utterly fucked, or their sacrifices at least mean something, or they have a purpose. These characters are not used just to get destroyed by the villains and that's it. They usually get the spotlight for other reasons as well. Unlike, of course, Mirko, who just exists for this. She exists to get dismembered and beaten, nothing else. And that's the point of this part of the video. And after all this, maybe you're saying, then what is left to say to defend this? And that's another good question. We've seen that the comparison to other characters used to justify Horikoshi's decisions with Mirko makes no sense. But it doesn't end there, unfortunately. There are more arguments used to excuse this kind of treatment. So brace yourselves, guys, we still have a long way to go. Okay, so we're starting strong, because apparently all this is completely justified because she's reckless and these are the consequences of her reckless actions. Ah yes, another fan favorite. It's true that Mirko may be reckless at times, but I don't think Horikoshi did all this to show her the consequences of that. I'll try to be brief here because I talked about this in the recap, but from what I understand, When you show a character a direct consequence of their actions, it's because you want them to learn from that, or, grow as a character at least. If that's the case, and Yaku was an attention call to Mirko, why does her character remain the same? And more importantly, why does this shit happen? And only specifically to her? Because if you say it's because she's reckless too, then Yaku served for absolutely nothing other than to, I don't know, show off how strong the enemies are, I guess? That was Mirko's role in there? Come on. Look, I know I said it before, but I have to say it again. And I'll probably say it many more times. But if you make a character suffer, especially if it's supposed to be the consequences of their actions, and in the ways Mirko does, but don't do absolutely anything else with it, nothing comes from that, then you're not showing them the consequences of their actions. All you're doing is, well, I bet you know what I'm gonna say. And now you'll probably say, dude, it's not that deep. That's not his intention. She's just reckless and that's it. That's her character. So are you telling me that she was conceived in such a way so that the author can do this, without a purpose in the story or reasonable explanation? Because since she's reckless, you can do whatever you want. Because then that means she doesn't get any development, so she can get dismembered again and use that as an excuse. Also, if Horikoshi is really doing it for her being reckless, why is she the only one who suffers the consequences of that? Because she's certainly not the only one who does reckless actions. Deku, for example. Deku breaks his arms fighting Muscular, and the doctor tells him, dude, if you keep abusing your arms, you won't be able to use them anymore. And then, despite everything, he breaks them again in Yaku. Consequences? Absolutely nothing. He can still use them after that. And you'll say, but the doctor said he'd give him 2 or 3 times, and he actually loses his arms in his last fight with Shigaraki. That's true. Actually, it's a similar fate to Mirko's. I wonder how he'll handle that now, and he got rewinded. In literally the next chapter. Consequences? Another one, come on. I'm feeling generous today. Meteor's reckless when fighting Overhaul. Regardless of the intentions, he goes ahead into his base and fights him alone. It's a similar situation to Mirko's in Yaku actually. And Overhaul's quirk is pretty OP, not to mention how ruthless he is. I mean, he literally experiments with a little girl. It's over for Meteor. Consequences? He lost his quirk. Well, alright, I guess. Oh wait, no. He got rewinded too. Consequences? Meteor's recklessness ends up being completely inconsequential. Same as Deku's. I could keep going, but I think you get it. But when it comes to Mirko, a character whose consequences don't affect the plot in any way, things are different, right? If we have this argument in mind, apparently the rest of the characters can get a pass when they're reckless, but not Mirko though. Look, she's reckless is just a lazy-ass excuse. If it's only used as an excuse to do, this, and nothing else like I said, then in my town we call that bad writing. Because in any case that's all it seems, an excuse. This argument is so stupid because it's used as some kind of green card to do anything. You don't need an actual reason, or give any purpose. Dismember a character all you want, only use them for that. Do whatever the fuck you want and it's okay because it all comes down to she's reckless. That's it, no need to say anything else or give it any more thought. That explains and justifies absolutely everything. Don't ask questions, she's reckless. This argument is just lazy. But let's move on from that, because another thing you see around is that she's just not strong enough and is overpowered by the villains she fights. Okay, but isn't that like everyone's situation? Or is this saying that a pro hero like Mirko is less prepared than some students, for example? Because apparently the students are all lucky enough to end up with just either shallow injuries or unconscious, right? I know a lot of students have very powerful quirks, but not all of them, obviously. But no, we better not hurt the students too much, right? Now, I'm not saying that every character has to be torn to shreds, but saying something like, whatever this argument is saying, sounds as if Mirko is the only one that's so overpowered, she gets dismembered every fucking time.
That's bullshit. And you know it.
Yeah, very convincing. Although I gotta say, this argument kinda helps in showing how putting Mirko against Shigaraki makes no sense, and how it's just an artificial and contrived decision by the author to, well, you know the reason. But don't worry guys, we're not done yet and everything's okay. Because as some people say, this is not a big deal cause she has badass prosthetics now. Oh, okay. So we can ignore this, because she has quote-unquote badass prosthetics now. Well, I don't really buy it, but hey, let's see how badass Mirko's prosthetics are portrayed by Horikoshi, huh? So, how does Mirko show off her prosthetics? What does she manage to do with them? Well, they get destroyed. Okay, but she has spares. Oh look, she's using them to shoot Shigaraki and her ammo doesn't even hurt him. And they get destroyed again. And that's it. That was Mirko's prosthetics, guys. Definitely nothing more badass than some useless prosthetics that only make you weaker, am I right? Anyway, do you really think Mirko's prosthetics are portrayed as badass here? Because they're just fucking useless. Yeah, prosthetics are usually pretty badass, but that's not how they're portrayed here. In any case, the only purpose they serve is making Mirko weaker. We can't even say at least now she can take advantage of them. It's not like, hey, what happened in Jaku was unnecessary, but at least now she's even better and can use prosthetics to her advantage. No, they just make her even weaker now. They're useless. She can't even use them because they get destroyed all the time. Is that badass for you? No, but they're obviously gonna get destroyed because she's fighting Shigaraki. Then why the fuck was she sent there if the heroes were aware of her prosthetics and Shigaraki's strength? I don't see how her prosthetics justify anything, honestly. They don't even seem to be fit for a character with Mirko's style of combat. This makes no sense. Let's move on, come on. This next argument is not very popular, but I wanted to talk about it in the video because I saw it and it's fucking crazy. And it's that Mirko losing limbs and getting prosthetics is because Horikoshi likes Star Wars.
What?
What the fuck? I mean, yeah, Horikoshi likes Star Wars, and there are plenty of Star Wars references in My Hero Academia. However, I don't think this in particular is a reference to Star Wars. Because the Star Wars or, for example, Spider-Man references have been around since the beginning, but prosthetics aren't really a thing until much later on. Mr. Compress has a prosthetic arm, but even that's an isolated case until Mirko and Aizawa get theirs. And also, if this was the case, I doubt the prosthetics would be portrayed as fucking useless as we've seen with Mirko. But okay, let's say that's the case. So what? Then it's just, hey, we're dismembering and torturing this character for no fucking reason, but it's all good, man, cause it's a Star Wars reference. No. Just no, okay? It's ridiculous. Just like the argument that says that this is just to show her quote-unquote animalistic side. What? Are you telling me that she has to lose 3 limbs for something like that? Guys, please tell me I'm not the only one who sees how stupid this sounds. I mean, if this is needed to show her animalistic side or whatever, was she already created with this purpose in mind? Because that's what it looks like if that's the case, and then it's not making it any better. But no, it's meant to mimic how some animals sacrifice parts of their bodies to escape a predator or a trap. I'm gonna be honest, guys. I honestly have no idea if this is serious or not. There's not much to say here. It doesn't make sense because if that was the case, the only instance where this could apply would be in the Shigaraki fight, which is already a stupid example by itself. The first 2 instances don't even apply to this. And even if you wanna say they do, are you telling me Horikoshi had to show this or make this comparison or whatever 3 fucking times? No, but there's a different reason for each limb she loses. No. She doesn't need to lose 3 fucking limbs to act like an animal or to make some weird comparison or whatever you want to imply with this, okay? It's ridiculous to say that's why this happens. Now this one is crazy too, because it sounds like someone just ran out of ideas to justify this shit. It's not a popular one at all, but I still want to talk about it. And it's that Mirko has a boring quirk, so all this is done to spice up her fights or make them more interesting.
That's bullshit. And you know it.
Okay, to whoever thinks of this as a valid reason, you realize Horikoshi created her, right? He gave her that quirk, her combat style, everything. If he thought she was boring and did this to spice up her fights or whatever, it literally says she was created with this purpose in mind already. I mean, if this is true, she was created as boring only to make her fights more interesting by, you know, this. And if he found her boring at first, wouldn't it make more sense that she would have been created with the prosthetics from the get-go? Oh no, but her fights can only be interesting if she loses limbs, right? But anyway, I think I don't have to tell you that this doesn't make sense. I highly doubt Horikoshi thinks Mirko is boring. I mean, he literally created her. Nah, Mirko's treatment is not due to something like this. Although I think it's safe to say that, from what we've seen, it's kinda obvious that she was created just for this. However, I don't think it's because he finds her boring. We're almost there, I promise.
I'm tired, boss.
I know. Me too, but I saved this one for last because it's an amalgamation, so to speak, of different ways of calling the same quote-unquote argument. And also it's very popular. It's basically the argument that says that all this is done to show how badass or determined or relentless she is and how she remains unfazed under those circumstances. Okay, I'll be nice and say I could somewhat understand removing one limb to show how she's not willing to give up despite that or whatever. Yes, doing that in her first fight is questionable as shit, and I'm not particularly a fan of how that happens, but I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt. However, this is hard to believe because there's absolutely no need to remove 3 limbs from her to prove that. The purpose of showing how badass she is gets lost when she loses a second limb. After that, it's clear that removing limbs isn't for that because it's unnecessary. And the third limb is just... I don't even know how to describe it, honestly. A fucking joke? I don't know. So no, this doesn't justify shit either because there's no need to reach such extents just to prove something like that. Especially when you see how other characters show how badass they are by, their strategies in combat or the use of their quirky skills. But according to this, for Horikoshi, the best way for Mirko to prove the same thing is by getting her body destroyed? Are you kidding me? Does that sound like a fair treatment to you? No, but you don't get it. Aizawa and Endeavor lose one limb and Mirko is meant to be that taken to the extreme. Oh, okay, so that's her entire role then. Her purpose in the story is being the character that gets destroyed just to prove a point. And that's it? Am I supposed to see that as a fair treatment for her? Because what does she actually get to do when doing that? In Jaku, she loses her arm, and then, okay, she kills the Nomu. Although it's not like she lost it in order to kill it. No. Suddenly, out of fucking nowhere, she loses it, and then after that she kills the Nomu. Totally unnecessary, but alright, at least she killed it, I guess, so that's a somewhat more understandable reason. But like I said, this happens at almost the beginning of the fight, before the rest of the things. So what about that? What about losing part of her ear, ripping her hair off, getting impaled, losing her leg, etc.? What was all that for? Only to show how she's able to keep going despite that? Because again, Present Mike is the one to destroy Shigaraki's capsule. Mirko doesn't even get to do that, so she lost her leg for absolutely nothing. So then, was it all just to show how badass or whatever she is? And in the Shigaraki fight? Same as in Jaku, but even worse. Out of fucking nowhere, she loses an arm, but she doesn't even do anything. What? Attack Shigaraki so he immediately transforms and wipes her out instantly? Only for Deku to arrive and beat the shit out of him until he's forced to transform back? Are you telling me Mirko was just meant to show how badass she is when she gets utterly destroyed and that's it? She has to lose her limbs to prove that, and once we had enough of that, we just get rid of her. Sure, she may last more, or less after that, but it comes down to that at the end of the day. Are you kidding me? That's all her character is for? She exists to show how badass she is when she gets destroyed and nothing else. That's the whole reason for that. Seriously? Just implying that reaching this extent is absolutely necessary just to prove something like that it's ridiculous. Like I said, when she loses more than one limb, it's clear that this is not the objective because there's no need to go that far just to prove that she's badass. It's fucking bullshit. And saying that she's treated the same as every other character just because she was already created with the intention of being the character who gets her body destroyed but keeps going is crazy. Because saying that she's meant to be the most extreme case of that is basically saying that that's her role in the story. And if that was the intention with her since the beginning, it isn't really helping in making it look good. I mean, how is her treatment fair if this is literally saying she's meant to be the character who gets dismembered the most? This is just like the reckless argument. Since it's apparently badass, we forget about the fact that she doesn't do absolutely anything else apart from getting dismembered. It automatically explains everything and invalidates any kind of criticism.
That's bullshit. And you know it.
But anyway guys, we did it. We went through all the arguments I could gather that try to excuse Mirko's treatment. Now, after all this, I think it's pretty damn clear that there's absolutely no justification for Mirko to get this kind of treatment. And that, no matter the way you look at it, it's impossible to call it a fair treatment or to say that she's treated the same as the other characters. We have proven that there's no purpose behind all the torture and shit Horikoshi puts her through, especially for a character with so little relevance as her and non-existent involvement in the plot. None of what we just saw changes the fact that Mirko doesn't have anything else apart from just appearing in fights so she can get dismembered. That's all there is for her. And that doesn't change no matter the reason you want to give it. Is that treating her the same as every other character? And even in the case you want to just shrug it off and say, meh, female characters in general are treated like shit in this manga, Mirko's no exception. I get that, but there's a difference between, for example, ignoring a character and just giving her some relevance with a stupid beauty contest, and ignoring a character and just giving her some relevance to get beat up and dismembered. I think the difference is clear. But now it's time to ask ourselves something. Why? Yeah, why? Why do this to a character? And why Mirko in specific? You know, I asked myself that question several times. I'm going to risk it and say what I think. Don't know if I'll be able to live this one down, but whatever. Honestly, all this shit looks like some kind of weird fetish for the author. Now, I know what you're saying. You're probably thinking, whoa. Stop right there. You're just making shit up now. And I understand that initial reaction. But come on, what do we know about the author? I mean, the guy's a pervert. He said it himself. And if it was just that, I just say,
Wow. To each his own.
But we all know it doesn't end there, because he even created a character whose sole purpose in the story is being horny. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. Mineta's role in the story comes down to making fanservice moments happen and being horny. The only different thing he did was helping Zero pass an exam, but it means nothing because he kept doing the same thing the rest of the time. And you know, making a character just for that is weird enough, but you're telling me that he relates to him? And I know it's because he's a pervert too. But seriously, what kind of perv do you have to be to see yourself in Mineta? Okay, so he's a pervert that relates to Mineta and, well, he's not really afraid of showing that in the manga. It's very hard to defend, honestly. But you may still do, and say, wait a minute, this doesn't mean anything because if the dismembering or amputee shit was a fetish, it would be a much more widespread thing throughout the manga and it would happen more often and to even more characters. And I would believe that if Mirko was just some random character. But she's not. I mean, she is for the plot, but not for Horikoshi. Because as we've seen, she was the character he was super excited to add to the story. To the point of obsessing over her and even drawing her, saying how creepy he was for that. Yeah, it's that weird. And then, when he finally adds her to the story, the only thing he does with her is this. He doesn't develop her, he doesn't give her any relevant thing or involvement in the story, we don't get any insight into her character whatsoever, nothing. Just this. So then, if he was so excited to add her, and when he does, he just does this, then, you don't need an exceptionally high IQ to figure this out. He was basically looking forward to this, and well, you already know. What a coincidence, am I right, guys? I mean, Horikoshi creates a character that he likes so much he grows obsessed with her, and is dying to add to the story. And when he finally adds her, he just uses her for this. So basically, he created her for this reason. Because Mirko is not the only irrelevant character in My Hero Academia, and there have been many more background characters with no development and as irrelevant as her around for longer. But coincidentally, she's the only one to get this kind of treatment. She's completely absent from the story except when there's a fight she can get dismembered in. She has 2 short-ass cameos to present her, and after that, as soon as she gets into her first fight, we get to business and time to dismember her. Then, after she gets fucked in Yaku, again, she completely disappears until Horikoshi drops her into the Shigaraki fight to dismember her again. And shortly after that happens, he just gets rid of her. And you can't say I'm making this up because this is all he does with Mirko. Because now, having Aizawa mention her and a single panel of her putting on her prosthetic after Yaku isn't using her for something else. That's even less than her first 2 cameos. She's just used for some weird torture porn or, at the very least, cheap shock value for the sake of shock value. Her appearances consist of her getting destroyed and dismembered. So I think it's not too crazy to think this is some kind of fetish for him, because it's very coincidental that this only happens with her. But okay, I'm gonna word it differently, because apparently as soon as you call it a fetish, you're labeled as delusional by the fandom. Okay, fine. Let's say he really likes dismembering and beating this character in specific, because that's all he uses her for after being so excited to add her. And before you say anything, no. I'm not Horikoshi, I can read his mind or whatever to say that this is 100% the reason. But genuine question, okay, genuine question here. What am I supposed to think when I see this? I mean, what am I supposed to think when I see this? And then I see this. Am I supposed to think it's all just a coincidence? And okay, you know I like to say this. Let's say that's the case and not what I said. Would that change anything? I mean, would that suddenly make Mirko's treatment fair? A character who has nothing going on except this treatment? I don't think so. But whatever you want to call it, it's not hard to see that Horikoshi really enjoys dismembering Mirko at every chance he makes. I mean, that's what he created her for after all.
Prove me wrong, kids. Prove me wrong.
And let's face it, it's also really easy to use a character like Mirko in this way. She's a background character, so no matter what happens to her or whatever she goes through, it won't have any repercussions on the plot or anything other than her. And since her role in the story is totally inconsequential, she can just completely disappear after getting destroyed in a fight. And then appear just for the next fight, so a similar thing happens again. There's no need for a second thought when it's a character like her. Maybe things would be different if we were talking about a main character. You know, a character whose consequences not only affected them, but also the characters around them and the plot itself. That's not as easy as just doing it and not giving a shit because, since the character doesn't matter, nothing else will happen because of that. But let's be real, if something like that happened, they would probably get rewinded or saved or whatever. You have the final war as proof of that. But with Mirko, it's easy. And safe. There are no risks in doing anything like that with a character like her. Anyway guys, I think that's all for that. And in case you're wondering why I made the video like this, you know, responding to the arguments I gathered as if I'm schizophrenic or something, well, it's because I just don't want to leave any room for doubt. I want to make clear that there's no way to call Mirko's treatment fair. No matter the way you look at it, no matter who you want to compare her with, it's a waste of time. And look, if you don't think it's because of a fetish, or whatever you want to call it, that's okay. Even if you still think it's because she's reckless, or because it's to make her look badass, or whatever. It doesn't matter because we've seen in this video how none of that justifies anything. None of that is enough to magically make Mirko's treatment fair in any way. None of that is enough to make you look at this and say, that's pretty cool actually. No. Because the truth is, Mirko has nothing going on for her. Absolutely nothing except this treatment. She has a semblance of a single accomplishment and that's it. And maybe you're asking why I say that when I literally said the high-ends are a big deal. I say it because all this is not worth just killing a Nomu. And I'll say it again, this is exclusive to her. No other character gets anything like this. Like I said, there have been many more unimportant characters around for longer than her. But this just happens with Mirko. With Mirko, you just don't have anything else other than this. And no matter the reason or explanation you want to give it, it's not going to change that fact. And honestly, I don't see why it had to be this way. And it's not like, you know, a case of the author running out of ideas or whatever. Like, maybe he ran out of ideas and couldn't think of anything else to do with the character. No, that's not it, because I think Horikoshi has proved to be very creative when he wants to. So I don't think he's lacking in ideas or creativity. That leads me to believe that every decision he makes is because, well, that's the way he wants it to be. I know it sounds redundant, but what I mean is, this is how he wants to use Mirko? Really? Just for this? As we've seen earlier, yes it is, but this is all this character is worth? He wanted to use her in the story just for this? For this? I don't get it. I really don't. I don't see what's so appealing about having a character being treated like this. Or more like, just for this. And you know, I was excited to see her take a part in the story as well when she was presented. But I guess I must be weird because I was expecting, well, some proper writing for her. Not this shit. And I was certainly not expecting having torture porn being made of her. Especially since that was never a thing in My Hero Academia before. I guess things changed when Mirko appeared. What a coincidence. Even if it were to be some kind of joke or something, I just don't get it. Maybe I'm just not in on the joke. And I'm not saying she has to suddenly be a main character or anything like that. I'm just asking for something that's not just this. Just her getting fucked and dismembered every time she appears and that's it. Because with Mirko there's only that. And it's sad, yeah. Having a really cool character used solely for something like this is such a waste. Her gimmick got turned from rabbit to getting dismembered by the grace of the author. that's her entire reason to exist. And that's the issue. She ends up being one of the characters who sacrifices the most in every fight she's in, but her role is always inconsequential to the plot. At least Edgeshot did it by his own quirk and just in the final war, and his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Mirko just loses limbs left and right and nothing else. It's just the senseless dismembering and torture of a character, nothing more than that. And I honestly feel bad for anyone else who wanted Mirko to have more screen time when she was presented. Because hey, you like Mirko in a normal way of course, and want to see more of her, especially in a fight because that's supposed to be her thing? Well, you can go fuck yourself, because you won't have that without her getting dismembered and any of that shit. Because that's her role in the story. The character who gets dismembered every time she's in a fight. This is all you're gonna get. Oh yeah, and probably the most fucking sickening moment in the whole manga. That too. Mirko just isn't allowed to shine unless she gets dismembered or just straight up destroyed. That's her condition to have the spotlight and a moment to quote-unquote shine. And that's the truth. It's even more exaggerated and obvious in the fight against Shigaraki. But yeah, she's not treated any differently, right? And I'm gonna be honest. If she only lost the first arm, or if the only time something like this happened was in the Yaku war fight, this video probably wouldn't exist. I mean, sure, Horikoshi definitely went out his way to injure Mirko as much as possible there, like I said. But if it were just a one-time thing, well, not much could have been said. Yeah, it would have still been weird as fuck, and completely unnecessary to go that far, but maybe it really was for her to learn something from that. But when it happens again, like when it's 2 times in a row, especially in such an obvious way as in the fight with Shigaraki, and she doesn't even do anything else besides, being treated like that, it lets you see everything in hindsight. And then, bro, I don't know how much more on the nose you want it. The Shigaraki fight proves that there's a pattern with her. With her specifically. The way the author uses Mirko in general is just, it's such a self-report. But especially in the fight against Shigaraki. I don't think I even have to point that out. And I know Horikoshi put her there for that reason in specific. Because the decision just doesn't make sense otherwise. But precisely because of that. At the end of the day, the more I look at it, the more I see that Mirko was just created for this purpose. To be, again, the fucking mid-chill of My Hero Academia and get dismembered at any chance the author creates. And do you think that's fair? Do you really think this is all this character had to offer? Because I don't. Maybe it would have been fine if she had other things going on for her apart from just this? Or if it happened in the span of more fights? I don't know, but when her whole reason for existing is just that, it's very hard to defend. Especially when no character is treated like this, except her. Either way, this is what we have, unfortunately. And this last part was just my opinion, and all this is probably a hot take, but personally, I think Mirko deserved better. Much better than whatever this is. She's a really cool character, but her appearances are just not enjoyable because of everything I've said in this video. So guys, we reached the end. We made it. Props to you if you watched the whole thing. That was a lot. Like, a lot to take in, I know. But I hope I've made everything clear. I don't have anything else to say, believe it or not. I would just be saying the same things I've been saying over and over again, and I don't want to fall into that tendency again. So to finish the video, I want to say that if you agree with what I've been saying, and you also notice this, let's say strange pattern with Mirko, please leave a comment down below. I'd really like to read about it. If you didn't notice, didn't care, or disagreed at first, but this video helped you see it, also comment. I would also like to read it. And if you still disagree, well, you can comment too, of course. Although all I had to say is already in this video, but everybody's welcome here, obviously. Anyway, that's all. And hey, if you want, you can share this video with anyone you think might find this interesting, because I'd like to think this video can spark up some more interest about this topic. And I'd really appreciate that. And with all that said, thanks for watching guys, take care.